Welcome to our third video in our module on emerging and young adulthood, where you're going to be learning about psychosocial development during this stage. So what will you be learning about in this video? You're going to be learning about psychosocial development, which includes the relationship between infant and adult temperament. You're going to be learning about personality in early adulthood and the five-factor model of personality. You'll also be learning about Erikson's stage of intimacy versus isolation and adult attachment styles. You're going to be learning too about relationships with parents and sibling relationships during this period of development. You'll learn about the factors that contribute to attraction, and you'll learn about cohabitation and some of the reasons for the decline in marriage. And then we're going to be exploring parenthood. So let's get started. people who are in committed relationships decide that they want to live together and not get married, or they want to live together before they get married. And what we're seeing is we're seeing an increase in the rates of cohabitation. And actually today, what we see is that the share of adults who've lived with a romantic partner is now higher than the share who have ever been married. Now, when we look at relationship satisfaction, the research does suggest that people who are married tend to be more satisfied with their relationships than people who are cohabitating and who are not married. And people who are married tend to be more trusting of their partners. Now, this is not to suggest that it is just the simple virtue of getting married that causes these changes. There are probably a variety of factors that are at play here. The question too is, why are we seeing an increase in the rates of cohabitation? So there's some speculation that it may be due to increased individualism and some increases in secularism, although I do want to point out that recent research suggests that nearly 3/4 of people who are evangelical Christians or Catholics say that it is acceptable to live together before marriage. I also want to say that another potential cause is that there are better economic options for women today than there have been historically. So women may be less inclined then to commit to a marriage until they really know for sure that that's what they want to do. So they're not feeling that economic pressure. And then we're also seeing an increase in enrollment in post-secondary education, where people are waiting until after they finish college to get married, but they may still want to cohabitate until that point. And I want to also share too that the rates and attitudes, of course, may vary across cultures. So we do see that overall the attitudes are pretty favorable and open to cohabitation among most people, especially among younger people in the United States. But we can go to many other places in the world where it would be much less acceptable. When we think about marriage, probably many of you have heard about or noticed some of the declining rates in marriage. And actually, the US marriage rate has fallen to its lowest level in 120 years. And studies have shown that adults in the US are increasingly postponing marriage, and that there's a record number of youth and young adults who are actually projected to forgo marriage altogether. And when we think about the coronavirus, there's actually been a pretty steep decline, even just from 2019 to 2020. And it'll be interesting to see what the rates are for 2021. So for the first time in American history, most adults now live outside of marriage, either as single parents, as partners in a cohabitating relationship, or as just single. And so I wonder, what do you think explains this decline? So I'd encourage you to just pause and reflect on this for a moment. Well, there are many reasons for the decline, and I'm certainly not going to be able to list all of the reasons, but I want to share with you some of the key reasons that researchers suggest may explain this decline in marriage. So one of the reasons has to do with some of the changes in the economic realities that no longer require women to marry for financial reasons. So there are new gender norms, and these undercut the past notions that a husband should be, for example, the head of his household, and that a wife may sort of give up her needs for his. And there are also some higher expectations about the level of intimacy and companionship and communication that marriage is expected to deliver. So people have some different ideas, perhaps some higher expectations for what marriage should be, and this may then lead to a greater level of selectivity or more postponement of marriage. Now, I want to point out that these are general explanations or generalizations, and of course there are individual explanations that we could find if we were to talk to different people. And certainly not everyone has a changed view about marriage, and not everyone has been affected by the new gender norms. But we do see that these are playing a role in the decline in marriage based on what the research suggests and based on what people are reporting. I also want to say too that There is some deepening ambivalence about the institution of marriage among some people. And this ambivalence seems to take on many different forms. So, for example, for some, it may be a sense that marriage demands disproportionate expectations from women. So, as we're seeing more women going to college, more women making good incomes, they may see then their roles as being different and may not want to make the sacrifices or to make those adjustments that they may think based on what they've learned about marriage or think about marriage. And not that those are necessarily true or untrue, it's unique for each person, but it may affect their views on marriage. And then for others, there is some research that suggests that for some people, they believe that marriage doesn't allow individuals the freedom to grow. And many of you may disagree with that. Some of you may agree with that. Certainly, we can see the great benefits of being in a committed relationship, but then we can also, if we look at this very honestly and openly, see that there are things that people do give up. But in the end, in a very healthy, good, committed relationship, there's certainly so much that you can gain from that relationship. So others may also be ambivalent about marriage because they may have seen the struggles that their own parents had when they were married, or perhaps their parents divorced, and perhaps it was a very negative experience for them, and they fear that they may experience the same thing. We also see that perhaps we're going to see that marriage rates may increase as we see the legalization of same-sex marriage across different states. I'm sure that many of you would agree that the way that marriage or committed relationships are portrayed in film is quite different oftentimes than it is in real life, especially if we look at cartoons, especially if we look at some of the older cartoons, even just going back a decade or two. Marriage is portrayed very differently than it may actually be. It's almost been enveloped in a romantic fantasy, whereas in real life, it really requires that couples undertake some very difficult tasks like negotiating issues of power and authority and decision making, and doing this over many years. And John Gottman is a very well-known researcher on marital harmony, and he's conducted over 40 years of research in this area. And I've posted a video on what John Gottman says are the factors that lead to relationship success and those factors that lead to relationship problems and inevitably potentially to the demise of the relationship. I'd encourage you to watch the video, and I'd also encourage you to do an internet search for John Gottman. There are many websites with very useful information about relationship success that are connected to John Gottman. You want to be careful, of course, of who you're getting that information from. And John Gottman is a very well-known and well-respected source in this area. An issue that can affect people at various stages of life, but that seems to affect women aged 18 to 24 at the highest rates, is intimate partner abuse. And intimate partner abuse or violence is a serious preventable public health problem, and it affects millions of people in the United States. And there are many people who experience this, and we don't know it because it's happening behind closed doors. So the term intimate partner violence, it's describing physical violence. It can describe sexual violence, stalking, or psychological harm. And this can be perpetrated by a person that a person's in a current relationship with, or a former partner or spouse. And of course, this type of violence can occur among heterosexual or same-sex couples. So like I said, this is really almost like, I guess we could say that this is an epidemic issue. It's one, intimate partner violence is very common, like I said, affecting millions of people in the United States. And so about 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men have experienced what we could call contact sexual violence or physical violence and or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. And they've also reported some form of an impact from this intimate partner violence. So Oh, if we think about the numbers, we're talking about over 43 million women and 38 million men have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Now, intimate partner violence starts early and it continues throughout the lifespan. And when it occurs in adolescence, it's called teen dating violence. And this affects millions of US teens each year. And so lots of men and women experience intimate partner violence or abuse. And we could see this as a significant public health issue, and it has individual and societal costs. So some of these costs include, of course, physical injury, psychological injury, but we know that intimate partner violence can also result in death. And actually, there's some data that suggests that 1 in 5 homicide victims are killed by an intimate partner. And actually, there's research that suggests that intimate partner violence can have an effect on the heart. It can affect our digestive systems. It can affect reproduction, our muscles and bones, our nervous system. And these effects often become chronic. And then there also can be some mental health effects, of course, like depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. So individuals who experience intimate partner violence are also at a higher risk of engaging in behaviors that can lead to some negative health outcomes like smoking and binge drinking and sexually risky behaviors. So I'm going to be placing a link within this module under the supplemental resources for intimate partner violence resources. And I've also got a phone number here on this slide for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Many young adults experience parenthood, and the average fertility rate for women is about 2.1. So that means that on average, a woman will have 2.1 children. And so this has been steady since the 1970s, but we've seen that the age of childbearing has changed. We're seeing that the birth rate is declining for women in their 20s and increasing in their 30s. And there are a variety of factors that can explain this, like education, so more women going to college, more women who are pursuing their careers and then having children later because of that, and then also, of course, birth control. Now, I want to share with you that it's predicted by some economists that COVID-19 will likely lead to a large, lasting decline in birth rates. And this is because the pandemic has thrust the country into an economic recession. And if we look at past evidence and just economic reasoning, it's suggested that this will lead people to have fewer children. So if we look at past examples of economic problems, if we look, for example, at the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009 and the 1918 Spanish flu, during those times, we also saw a decline in birth rates. So we may also see that happen as a result of COVID. Of course, as we think about parenthood, we naturally then think about the parent-child relationship. And while when we think about the parent-child relationship, we may look individually at parents and then individually at children, that relationship and that dynamic is bi-directional. So parenting strategies are affected not only by variables related to the parent, but they're also related to variables that are associated with the child. And there are many factors that affect how parents parent. Of course, those can include things like personality traits, how you were raised, the child's characteristics, and socioeconomic factors and cultural expectations. What I do want to point out, though, is that when we think about parenting, you'll remember what you learned earlier in this course, that ideally, in this country, in the United States, the research suggests that there is one particular pattern of parenting that seems to have the healthiest outcomes. And you remember that you learned about 4 different patterns of parental behavior that we call parenting styles that can each have different impacts on children's health and development. Well, as you'll remember, it's the authoritative parenting style that leads to the best outcomes. And this is the style that's characterized by high expectations of children, but unlike the authoritarian style, these parents provide a great deal of support and guidance for their children. So it's not I have these expectations and you have to fulfill them and you better do it because I'm your parent. It's that I have high expectations for you, but I also support you and I provide you with guidance. So authoritative parents set rules, but they also explain these rules and they set clear and fair expectations. And when kids make mistakes, parents offer consistent discipline, but they also make sure that their children know why they're in trouble and how they can avoid this kind of trouble again in the future. So some of the things that if you were to think back at your childhood that might tell you if your parent was an authoritative parent, what you might have found would be that your parents expected a lot out of you, but also provided you with the support that you needed to meet those expectations. Your parent may have listened to you and offered guidance and assistance. And your parent may have seemed to feel like having a positive relationship with you was very important. And your parent may have been very consistent about enforcing the rules in your home where you lived. So remember, being an authoritative parent is typically identified as the best approach to parenting. And that's, of course, in the US. We know that in some cultures, even though it may sound counterintuitive to some of you, authoritarian actually may work very well, especially in some Asian cultures. But in particular, here in the United States and Western Europe, authoritative parenting is ideal. Kids who grow up with authoritative parents, they tend to be more self-regulated and independent as they grow older. And authoritative parents also tend to raise happier and more successful children. So why is it superior? What is the reason? What do you think would be the reason? Well, the research suggests it's because these parents have high but reasonable expectations of their kids while also providing support and communication. And so these are important things that kids need in order to be successful. And so kids are able to also to see that their parents' rules are fair. And then over time, they internalize these standards. And children are then able to develop that internal sense of right and wrong, as well as the self-regulation skills that they need in order to control their behavior. So for any of you who are in this stage where you're a parent, there are, of course, multiple books, thousands, tens of thousands, if not more books on parenting. I would suggest that if you are looking at any of those books, that you look at the credentials, of course, of the author. Make sure that the author is providing you with some very specific guidance. And also remember that parenting should be approached from a positive perspective. It should not be one where we are heavily punitive and that's the main focus. There needs to be consequences, but we need to see that focus on reinforcement so that kids know what to do and how to behave. And more than anything, we need to have that secure attachment, that loving dynamic that develops over time between the parent and the child. Parenting is difficult. It can be a big challenge, and there's no clear answer to the best way to parent a child because every child is different. But I think if we think about some overall guiding principles, we can see that we can, over the long term, have some very positive outcomes. And here you'll see an image taken from your textbook that shows you all of the different factors that can affect parenting, including parent characteristics, child characteristics, and contextual and sociocultural characteristics.